Okay. So, thanks everybody. It's going to be a hard talk to follow, to be fair, but I'll do my best. So I'm going to talk a bit about protecting outside the box, and I'll explain what that means. So everybody here has seen a diagram like this before in every security book you've ever come across. The idea of a castle as security and securing your network, right? With multiple layers of defense and so on in there. This is completely useless to everybody in this room, and I'll give you a reason why. First of all, none of you are probably defending medieval castles from attack, so it doesn't really apply. What you're defending is something like a server room or an enterprise of some description, right? And as horrific as that cabling is, imagine having to run Cat6 cable through a medieval castle, or what effect those walls would have on Wi-Fi, right? There's a reason Jeremy Irons always looks miserable in every movie that he's in. So, what you're actually protecting is probably something a bit like this. You have a whole bunch of different sub-networks, you've got VPNs, core switches, cloud services, all that sort of jazz. And defending this is actually, it's tricky, but there's no kind of traditional perimeters like we talked about in a castle scenario, right? But you can still do defense in depth, and you can do isolation and segmentation and a whole bunch of things to deal with that. And luckily, there's a ton of solutions for all of this sort of stuff, for the traditional attacks, right? There's even vendors that will cover all of that stuff and have some of the most attractive presenters this side of Brian Honan. Just pointing that out there. This is literally the only product placement I'm doing the whole thing. But you probably have a pretty good grasp of all this stuff, or at least you maybe haven't deployed it all, but you know what it is and you know how it exists. I'm going to focus on the stuff that none of this covers. Right, so different attack scenarios that you mightn't have in your kind of security models. So we'd start off with this one, our first kind of non-traditional thing that your security model probably doesn't fully cover. So quick show of hands, who here has worked from home in the last month? Right, now keep your hands up if you were genuinely working from home as opposed to working from home. Okay, right, fair enough. So your work environment probably looks something similar to this. You get up in the morning, you jump on the Wi-Fi, fire up the VPN into the office network, and away you go, right? And what you don't realize is you're sitting in an InfoSec team's worst nightmare. I'll explain why. First, quick tangent. If you remember Bring Your Own Device, so Bring Your Own Device was a major trend in around 2012, was when it kind of peaked. And essentially, the problem there was you had stupid humans, or valued employees, as they're also known, bringing whatever they wanted from their homes into the office, and you had to deal with that. And now we've since solved that, right? We figured out there is no perimeters, and you use network segmentation, zero trust networks, all that kind of thing. That house is essentially Bring Your Own Device in reverse. So instead of people bringing stuff from their home into your network, they're bringing your network into their home. And that is a nightmare for a couple of reasons, and I'll go through them why. First of all, that camera came from China. It hasn't had a firmware upgrade in 5 years. The default login password is admin, and it's currently controlled by a Mirai-based botnet and a script kiddie called Chad. So Chad likes to look at your employees through that webcam while they're doing their daily business, sort of preparing for the day when he wants to become a more valued member of society. This router over here, otherwise known as the device that all of the traffic between your employee and your network goes over, that's also horribly compromised. Right? Now that is less of an issue for two reasons. The first is because you're all good at security, you insist that your employees use VPN for everything that they access in your network. And nobody here has webmail exposed publicly to the internet or anything like that, right? And the second reason is the router doesn't really care about your employee because it's too busy mining cryptocurrency. So that's amazing. Then you've got these two devices. You have a Sonos speaker and you have an Alexa. So quick show of hands, who here has an Alexa, Google Home, any sort of smart speaker? A few people. Does anybody have them in their corporate environments? No? Okay, that's a good thing. And I'll explain why. So what's the worst that can happen with these things? Well, you can get situations like this. Let me play. Click. No. Anyway. Is that going to play? There we go. And you can't hear it. Well, what essentially happened was the Sonos speaker said, Alexa, what time is it? And the Alexa perfectly answered back to the Sonos speaker. So we essentially figured out ways to hack the Sonos speaker or Bose speakers to do the exact same thing, and then play commands to the Google Home or Alexa that was in listening range. Now, asking the time isn't exactly critical, but you could do something like, Alexa, open the smart lock, and the front door pops open. Or Alexa, and then any of the various skills they have installed to talk to their various different cloud services. So we released a paper on this earlier this year, looking at kind of what attack scenarios can you put around that. We found that these smart speakers, they have APIs in place that let you, for God knows what reason, play an MP3 file from anywhere on the internet, and all you need to do is, there's no authentication, you just need to know the IP of the Sonos speaker, and you can make it play stuff. So we've crafted MP3s and then played them at remote locations. And to find the Sonos speakers is easy. So we just partnered with Shodan. We got them to scan the internet for all of the Sonos and Bose speakers they could find, which at the time was about 4,000. It's about 5,000 or nearly 6,000. And that's because these lovely devices, like many IoT devices, actually use UPnP to punch a hole straight through your home router and put themselves publicly on the internet. Again, your router doesn't care. It's actually stopped mining cryptocurrency and it's currently DDoSing a Minecraft server. But either way. Worse than this is the fact that they also expose on port 1400 a whole ton of really interesting debug information, which again, you can publicly access from anywhere on the internet. So, for example, one of these menus shows all of the devices on the home network, so and the names, and the IP addresses, so Bob's iPhone or work laptop and all of that kind of thing you can see. Another one in there shows all the connected services, and the logins and hashed passwords for Spotify, Last.fm, whatever music services you use. Now, the reason that's bad is, as anyone in the CTF room will tell you, to treat the security of a hash password with a grain of salt. Salt, hash, that joke? Okay, sorry. But the reason for that is password reuse. We see it in so many attacks that we've seen against customers and so on, that the reason was they shared a work password with their personal Gmail accounts and Spotify accounts and so on. So cracking those passwords can actually get you the credentials you need to start going after the work network. And it actually is even easier for the attacker because you don't even need to crack the passwords. At the time we took, there was 4,000 devices when we did it, and of them 1,300, we got 1,300 different email addresses that we could pull off the actual, the open debug information. We then ran them through Have I Been Pwned using Multigo to see were they in public breaches, and a ton of them are in big breaches like LinkedIn, Adobe, Dailymotion, all of these databases that are very easy for any attacker to download and get. So the attacker actually has plain text versions of these passwords in most cases. And even if they've changed the password, people tend to do it from change me 1 to change me 2 and change me 3, so you can figure it out and get in. Another thing that we found, it exposes all the Wi-Fi networks that are in range. I'll explain why that's a bad thing later. One fun thing that came from that in the research was trying to decide which SSIDs we were going to put into the paper that we thought were funny and not horrifically bad and couldn't go in there. My favorite one is probably Pretty Fly for a Wi-Fi. That one's kind of cool. So back to the team, or back to the house. So all of my team are remote, including myself, right? And we all have similar setups to this. Because we're all techies, some people might have Alexas, some people might have Google Homes, or they all have IoT devices on their network because they're techies, and that's kind of what we do. And what's really interesting is the voice commands from things like Google and Amazon are all stored permanently. So if you log into your Google account or your Amazon account, you can see all the past history. And it's especially bad in the case of Google because you will regularly in work meetings use Google as a noun, right? So I Googled something yesterday. And it's surprising how often a device will pick that up as OK Google. And then the next about 10 seconds of what you say is permanently recorded on Google servers. So if you can get into that, you can see all that stuff. Actually, within our team, we have a small hobby of saying Alexa followed by horrible things. To see can we get our teammates on no-fly lists. So Alexa, order Semtex from Amazon. So actually, small thing, if you do that, it'll normally add, there's a CD by an artist called DJ Semtex, and it adds that to the cart, which is interesting. They don't sell actual Semtex on Amazon. So today's home is very much the new mobile office, and we encourage people to work from home because it's a good work-life balance. But you need to treat your employees working from home essentially like a plague zombie, right? Don't think of them as working on a possibly compromised network. Assume that your employees, if they're working from home, are essentially connecting to you from a Starbucks cafe beside the DEF CON security conference. If you can cope with that level of risk in your attack profiles, then you can have this thing secured properly. Also, employees are also on the move, right? So nowadays when we walk around, we essentially walk around with a personal area network, or they're called body area networks in some cases, on us at all times. So things that are on, in, or your body, or backpacks and things like that. So in my case, a Fitbit, phone, laptop, iPad, that sort of thing. The first of them, we'll focus on mobile phones, because these can be very bad, and things can happen with them. In my case, so when I travel, my mobile phone becomes my hub. that essentially I do all my work through, right? So when I was coming up on the train from Cork yesterday, I would spin up a hotspot and then I would VPN my iPad and laptop through it. My Fitbit's communicating to it the whole time. It's talking to a whole bunch of different cloud services at the same time. And you might think, okay, well, fair enough, you can do the exact same thing with Wi-Fi. If you say that, you have never taken a train through Offaly in your life. I'm pretty sure broadband in Offaly is controlled by smoke signals, probably through burning turf. But this is going to get worse because in the next 2 or 3 years, as 5G rolls out, the speed increase of 5G will probably even mean that phones will take the place of mobile broadband in kind of rural locations, right? The speed will be good enough. And of course, with a mobile device, yes, your employees can get malware on it. There's the bring your own device issue, but there are things that, like that word cloud I showed you earlier, there's AV and stuff that can deal with that. But there's other things that AV won't help you with. So, for example, one of the things that employees do a lot of on their work phone is check their email, right? And for email, you have a whole bunch of filters in the Exchange server that will block phishing links and so on. How many people here have SMS Interception set up for their employees in work? Probably nobody, because it's considered wiretap and it's generally legal, right? But think of this attack scenario, right? An attacker crafts an SMS for either a target attack or a more widespread one. They then send it to your employee when your employee is in the office network on their mobile phone. The employee then clicks on the link in that SMS because, frankly, employees always click on the link in the SMS with a bit of social engineering. And now the attacker can completely compromise that device. So, of course, they could just install malware, but I'm not really interested in that. What's more interesting is they're already on your network at this point, or the employee is on your network with their mobile phone at this point. And even with something like a simple URL, there's a bunch of different router attacks and like web server attacks and so on your internal network that you can exploit with a single URL. Or certainly if you can run JavaScript, you most definitely can hit some of these and change settings on them. And even if you have AV on the phone, you have like email security, checking for phishing links, you have gateway security so that you can't get out to malicious links, none of that stops the SMS getting in. And once the SMS gets in, you're on a trusted device on the network connecting to another trusted resource in the network. So it's very unlikely that that will kind of be stopped. And this stuff does happen, right? So we've seen this back since 2016. There was a series of attacks on using SMS across multiple countries, which is interesting because it worked for multiple mobile providers. And they were doing essentially targeting ZTE, D-Link, and TP-Link modems. And they would use JavaScript simply to log in with default username and passwords, change the DNS settings to something malicious, and then away they go. And, click on. So another thing in security models around phones that you mightn't have thought about, and this won't be news for a lot of people in the room, but it will be for others. When you walk around, your mobile is constantly broadcasting all of the SSIDs it's ever tried to connect to before, right? And there's also sites like Wiggle that just take war driving information and nicely graph that all out. So you put the two together and you can geolocate networks that people have been on. Where that comes in on the employee side and targeting your organization is an attacker, now this is a more targeted situation, but they can essentially sniff the employees going in and out of your building, see all the SSIDs they went to, and they can get things like obviously the houses where your employees live, but also like what customer networks do they go to for the sales guys, like who are your customer base, who are your partners that they visit, what hotels do they stay at, all of that information about employees, which can be a goldmine for really kind of targeted corporate espionage type stuff. And that sort of physical level of surveillance is probably outside the scope for many people in this room, but for others in this room, it definitely isn't. So things like if you're a bank for doing like a tiger kidnapping, right, knowing exactly where the CEO lives and that kind of thing, you can do with this. And that's also, we did that in the Sonos case. If you remember the Wi-Fi from the Sonos, that particular Sonos was at that exact house, where is it? Here, in Zurich, in Switzerland, so we could figure out exactly where these people were. This is luckily dying out because iOS 10 and Android 8 now randomize the MAC address when you're doing that SSID scanning, which is good. But it doesn't really matter when you're targeting a company because you mightn't care about the individuals. You just care about the overall data. So like of all the people going in and out of the building, they've all accessed this network, this network, this network. That's probably the three major customers of this organization, right? So you can do a lot of meta information. Also, when we talk about body area networks, another one that's probably out of scope, but this is just too fun not to show. Anyone know what this is? Or if I zoom in, know what that is? So that's a US military base in Helmand province in Afghanistan. Now, generally speaking, armies don't put up maps of their bases on the internet, and they certainly don't color code them with heat maps of where everybody has walked. And the reason that this happened was there's a company called Strava, which essentially take data from things like your Fitbit and other vendors, and they produce a data set which they put completely publicly on the internet of all of the heat maps of everybody who'd ever walked and used their product. Now, luckily it was anonymized, so you couldn't tell, like, this person is walking from here to here. But for your business, you could simply take your business and see all the routes people take to your business, which would then identify the homes of all of your employees. Pretty simple, right? Now, luckily, this got a lot of negative press when it came out in January, so it's unlikely to be repeated, right? So people will have learned from this. Nope. This is 6 months later. Polar, a company that do pretty much the exact same thing as Strava. They take your fitness data and so on. They did the same thing. They published it all on their site, but they made it worse. Because you could click on any individual, you could see their corresponding Facebook account, and everywhere that they had walked anywhere in the world since 2014, along with their heart rate information at the same time. Right? That is not good. Right, so obviously you can figure out where people live because it's where they sleep. You could take a building of interest. You can see all the paths that people take to and from it. So you can, again, profile the company in very, very interesting ways. You can even check their heart rates if you wanted to know, why did the guy's heart rate spike for 5 minutes before he went to sleep last night, right? Doing exercise. Right, anyway, exercise. So, but I'm not saying that you need to kind of factor in things like employees' locations in your risk models, because maybe it matters, maybe it doesn't, or key employees, it certainly might. What I'm saying is, when you see new popular apps and devices, like fitness bands, apps, and things that your employees are talking about, or just friends of yours are talking about, think about how does that apply to my risk models? Do I have to factor that in? So something like a fitness band is in this scenario as well. Or even if you've ever had to piece together what you did the night before by checking Google Timeline, then same thing. If you compromise somebody's Google account, you see all that location information as well. Like they're in the office at 9 o'clock, then they went to a meeting with the supplier, then they came back to the office, then they went to here, then you add all that information if you compromise the personal accounts of your employees. So far, everything I've talked about has been more device-based. I'm now going to go on to something that is the number one cause for concern for anybody in InfoSec, which is, of course, humans. Right? And for some reason, HR generally don't let us patch humans. It's frowned upon. It's considered genetic testing, and you're not supposed to do it. But for the second part, I'm not going to talk about social engineering, because I think everybody here knows about that. What I want to talk about is how much your employees share about your organization online that makes you so much easier to target for an attacker, right? Now, this is something red teams and attackers know all about, but it's amazing how many companies I talk to that are customer of ours, they maybe bought like all our stuff, so they've got like all the firewalls and IDS and all that, but they have literally no policy in place about what their organization can share about them, or what their employees can share about the organization on social media. And why is that a bad thing? Well, nowadays we live in a culture of oversharing, right? So unless somebody likes it or plus ones it or so on, you don't feel validated. And people post far too much content online as a result. So you could be like the number one guy in your company knowing about checkpoint firewalls, right? But unless somebody has actually voted you up on LinkedIn, you don't care about that. Example of this. So here's a redacted LinkedIn profile just of a security engineer I came across. And his last 4 security roles are up here. And when we zoom in, you probably can't read that very well, he's even been nice enough to list the exact version numbers and product numbers of every security device at all of his past 4 vendors. That is a goldmine if you're an attacker. Now I know what exploit kits I need to use and everything else along those lines. Right, and I'm pretty sure this person may actually be in this room as well. So if you look around and there's a person fidgeting while trying to look natural, it's probably them. That's the kind of the security equivalent to doing a fart in a room and looking at everybody else in disgust. Anyway. So another famous example is this one. Everything in capital letters here is a program from the NSA, which was not public until Snowden did his leaks. At least it wasn't public unless you checked this contractor's LinkedIn page, because he had all of them listed and what some of them do. Which is not good, right? So, and the same you can do for organizations when you target them on Facebook. So Facebook gives some very good search terms. So for example, here's all the people that work at Trend Micro. So I search for that. Here's the people who worked in Trend Micro and actually like Trend Micro. None of my team show up in this list, which I'm going to assume is down to good OPSEC and not shitty management. But if you want to target a company, for example, you can say, okay, show me all the people, because you can chain these searches very easily in Facebook. Show me the people who work for company X that are based in Ireland, that have IT admins somewhere on their Facebook page, and then maybe like a certain music artist. Then you just profile the guy, see when he posts updates, especially during work hours. That's probably like when he's on his break and he always checks Facebook. You hit him with a phishing email for the thing he likes, like a music artist or tickets or something at that exact time, and he is going to open it on his work laptop. And he's going to be highly likely to open it because you know all about his personality because you've read through his online social profile. And we see a lot of phishing attacks that work exactly this way. And the reason that works, and it's easy, is that there's a link here between the person and their organization. If you break that link, if you just say you're not allowed to say that you work for Trend Micro on Facebook, right, it becomes harder. Not impossible to do this, but still harder for people to actually target you. So if you have these policies in place. And another area we looked at when we did this research was actually dating sites. So you might think, okay, like LinkedIn is professional data, right? So that's always going to be linked to your company in some way. Facebook probably shouldn't be, but it's a gray area. But dating sites, you're not going to see anything that could compromise an organization, right? You'd be surprised. So we set out with 2 questions when we did this research. The first was, if we have a targeted interest, like the CFO for a company that you wanted to hack, could you find them on a dating profile? And that's assuming that they have a dating profile, right? And then also, if there's a dating profile, can you work from that backwards and find somebody's more professional information, like their LinkedIn page and so on? And the answer in both cases is absolutely yes, you can. So the reason for that is, and this shouldn't be surprising, the search engines on dating sites are incredible. You can get down to, I want to see somebody who's 6'2", in Cork, with brown hair, works in IT, earns this amount of money per year, etc., etc. So you can, from somebody's LinkedIn profile, you will zero in on their dating profiles in about 5 minutes. We never fail to find somebody if they had an actual dating profile doing this. Going the opposite way is actually surprisingly easy as well, because people regularly put up where they work on their dating profiles. Now you think, why the hell would you do that? But we're humans. We're trying to, it's like, imagine David Attenborough going on about attracting a mate, right? You're trying to portray yourself as good looking as possible, having like a really good job and something and so on and so forth. So people will regularly actually tell you what they do. And if you start interacting with them, they will gladly tell you all about their job and what they work at and everything else. So finding people in these associated with a company is very easy. Exploiting them is also easy. We set up a number of accounts, and what we did was we checked, could we send malicious URLs from account to account, like phishing URLs, exploit kit URLs, and so on. Nothing blocked. Absolutely nothing blocked. So it's very easy to phish people through these as well. One of the important things when you're doing any research on the dating side is location. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense for an app to suggest to me somebody in New Zealand if I'm based in Dublin, right? It's kind of hard to hook up with somebody on the other side of the planet. But if you use Android emulators, it's very easy to use GPS spoofing. You just say, I am at this location, and all the apps will pick it up, and then you can target. So you put the location exactly on the office building that you're targeting, and then any dating profiles within range, which is all the employees, are going to show up on there, right? And you can actually do some really cool research by a different company called Include Security, where they use this to triangulate the exact position of people. So what they would do is to just keep moving their fake GPS around and see when the person dropped out of range. And then you do that from multiple positions and eventually find out exactly where they are in the world. And you can track them in real time with this as well, with some of the dating apps. As they move around, you can track them, which is, again, a personal app that your employees are using that can be used against you. So in our setup, what we did was we set up honey traps. And by honey traps, I don't mean something bad happening to Winnie the Pooh. I mean attractive looking profiles on dating apps that people were likely to interact with in some way, shape, or form. So we had 3 main categories. We had ones that were very obviously fake, like Dr. McStudmuffin and Honey Von Trapp. Then we had, they still got lots of people connecting to them, it's amazing. Then we had some that were like attractive looking people, right? Realistic, but like attractive looking people. And then we also had a control group of like 3s, 4s, 5s at absolute best, right? So people that nobody is going to want to interact with. I know that's harsh, but it worked, right? The goal was to see, are these things widespread attacks that just hit everybody, or are they, more targeted in nature? And at least in our case, so for example, if you were to do a target attack, you could make it, if I was wanted to target Brian, you could change Honey Von Trapp's profile to something a bit more specific. This is Mayo lady seeks person to share sudden surge of hope followed by crushing feeling of despair in and around 3rd weekend in September, right? So that would probably work. Brian's happily married, but anyhow, right? So target attacks like this do happen on dating platforms. For example, the Israeli Defense Force was targeted by pro-Hamas hackers in 2017 for this exact same purpose. And they even convinced a lot of them to install an app on their like their work phone, right? That for the purposes of sharing photos and videos anonymously with that person. And of course, the app was a backdoor, and then had a backdoor into the network and so on. And also, this type of research has some really interesting side effects. You learn some great chat-up lines when you hang out in dating sites for a couple of weeks. Here's 2 you can try out later on at the bar if you want to see if that works. The second interesting side effect is if you need to interact with somebody on a dating site, you have to be both attractive to them and you have to like them first. There has to be a 2-way connection, and then you can start talking and hitting them with URLs and all that kind of thing. So what we did was we divided up the groups among our team, and essentially I got 2. I had a JDate, which is a site for single Jewish people looking mostly for long-term relationships, and then I got Grindr, which is not that. So it's also a very, very understanding, because I used to like update the profiles at night, right? Because I have to like the people so they potentially like me. And I would normally do it with a very understanding wife who has their husband sitting beside them in bed, swiping through Jewish ladies' profiles and occasional pictures of the male anatomy, right? So that's kind of weird. So just to recap and finish up, explains that most of you will have a lockdown network already in your organization through all the stuff that we talked about so far. Or at least you know how to do it. You mightn't have the budget for it, but you can work on it. What I wanted to help you do is think a little bit beyond that, right? So we talked about a lot of different device attacks and kind of people profiling attacks that can be used against an organization. Some were maybe too targeted for your risk models, but others are definitely more widespread, like the use of certain IoT devices. People working from home is going to be a big, major issue for security in the next couple of years. And the goal here is whenever you see like a new app or device or stuff that people are talking about, not just your employees, but just like the world starts talking about, think to yourself, how can this be used, even if it's a personal app, against my organization? And that's what I want to try and get across to you today. So, hope everybody found at least one thing useful in there that you didn't think about before. If you seriously disagree with some of the comments that I had, I'm more than happy for you to tell me about it, and you can buy me a beer at the bar later on. Just please do swipe right first. So, thanks very much.